Welcome back to another Coach's Corner. I am joined by Notre Dame assistant Ryan Munger for the second straight year. Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Monty, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. We are in the holiday season. We are in that lull where you're obviously still working, the players are working, but you guys are not working together. You're in that lull where it's somewhat off season because a lot of people don't know college baseball. Their preseason basically happens in the fall, and then you have time off, which is an interesting way of going about things. But we did have you on last year, but we're going to kind of cover some more conversations that we didn't that for people who didn't see last year's show. But can you talk a little bit about your coaching journey and how you got to Notre Dame?
Yep. So I played at Duke. I graduated in 2013. Once I got done playing, I got straight into coaching. I got to get my start at Davidson College. I got to work for Dick Cook for 5 years, and I worked with Rucker Taylor for those 5 years. And then after Coach Cook retired, became the head guy. And then I got to work with him for four. And kind of during that time, I was competing in the A10. So I was coaching against Coach Stifler for 8 of those years while I was at Davidson, and then when Coach Stifler got the head job here at Notre Dame, he gave me an awesome opportunity to come along with him, and that was how I quickly said yes and jumped aboard and going into my fourth year now.
Absolutely. And the A10, it's typically a one bid league, but it's loaded with talent. And we're going to find out this year a lot of transfers. If you look at last year's A10 teams, a lot of those guys have come over to the ACC and the SEC. It's going to be interesting to see. It's just funny that the load of talent, even though it's a one bid mid major, but Davidson traditionally very good. VCU, Coach Stifler built that team up. But you were the first team captain for Coach Pollard at Duke. He has now moved on to Virginia. We talked last year. You had not gotten an opportunity since joining Coach Stifler at Notre Dame. I think you had faced Duke obviously while you were at Davidson, but you hadn't gotten an opportunity to face Duke or Coach Pollard when you were at Notre Dame. This year, you get to do both. You get to go to your old stomping grounds at Jack Coombs, and then I believe you guys are hosting Virginia with Coach Pollard. How cool is that you didn't get either one, and now you're getting both in the same year?
It's cool. I think I'm kind of like old enough, and now I'm kind of where my feet are. So it's more just like, all right, like it's a business trip.
Yeah.
Let's go. Duke's changed so much, so it barely seems like the same place that was there when I was in school. And now to be cool to see Coach Pollard in UVA uniform. I've been able to see him. I saw him down at Jupiter when we were recruiting. Probably a month or two ago now. So it was different to see him in the blue and orange, but it's always good to see him. And he obviously played a big piece in me getting into coaching. Always good to see him.
Yeah, that whole coaching staff adjusting to that new color, having been so close with them at Duke, it's a very jarring thing. So I had to take the whole fall to really get used to that. But you talked about that. Did you get to see? I mean, obviously you didn't see it in person, but did you get to see any of the clips of Jack Coombs during the Super Regional and what that stadium looked like? That must have been a bit crazy to see.
Yeah, no, it was a little bit of a unique feeling. So but I did get to see it. So it was definitely a good opportunity for those guys for sure.
Absolutely. It's exciting. We'll talk a little bit more. Notre Dame's schedule not officially out, but we do want to talk about the Jacks College Classic later. But that's going to be really exciting. I'm going to be there for that, but we'll talk about
Cool.
that in a little bit. Still talking about your coaching journey a little bit. Who and you talked about some names that are probably going to be in this list, but who do you view as a mentor or somebody you try to emulate as a coach?
Well, I think the easy one definitely started with Coach Pollard, just being able to play for him, and he did such a great job in helping me get into the coaching world. I definitely learned a lot on the recruiting side of things from Coach Josh Jordan. I definitely learned a ton from working with Rucker Taylor and working under Coach Cook. I think Rucker was probably the biggest guy who kind of influenced my coaching career and just some of the philosophies and just kind of the way we go about coaching. And then, now I think years one and two, maybe working with Stiff, I was trying to figure out like, okay, like how do we work together? How do we do all this? And I think now I've been in the system long enough. I've been able to work with Coach Stifler a lot that now like I've really been able to kind of see the forest through the trees, I guess. And I feel like I understand a lot more of, how Coach Stifler sees the game, how we view winning, how we try to set up a practice, how we try to take that practice plan and how that's going to help us win a ball game, how we're going to set up BP that day and how that's going to help us win a ball game. So, I think I've definitely learned a lot through all my different stops and through all the different people I've been around. But I think, now, especially now that I've gotten a chance to work with Coach Stifler and probably I've matured a little bit in age. I think some of my most growth and some of the most learning I've been able to do has just been in the past, honestly, probably past 2 years, just working under Coach Stifler and getting a chance to work with some of the guys I work with now, and Lucas Jones and Seth Oltz and Doff and Cam Lane.
Absolutely, and I got to interview Coach Stifler. We didn't do it. He didn't join the show, but I got to interview him for an article about some of the freshmen you guys had last year. And one of the things I really appreciate about Coach Stifler is he doesn't do a ton of coach speak in the
Hmm.
interviews, which is great. He's very blunt and he seems to be very realistic with his answers. And that's something I really appreciate. Is that how he? I mean, it seems like that's how he is in
Yeah.
normal things. He's very aware of what the teams, what the team's capable of, and what you guys are trying to do.
100%. I think that's how he interacts with the players too. I think one of the best things he can offer them is just consistency, and like all of our guys are going to understand, where they stand in the program and where they stand with him. And I think coach is great in the fact of, he can be one of the first guys you can joke with. And DJ Hellwig had a great Sean Stifler Halloween costume impersonation this year, but at the same time, like, he'll be the first one to hold you accountable when you're not, you know living up to those standards that have been set in place. So I think he was able to walk a really, really fine line of like, okay, yeah, here's their time where we can have a good time. Here's where we need to lock it back in and be accountable and go get the job done.
Absolutely. He was very businesslike when I interviewed him, but then at the end, when I mentioned that I lived in Richmond, he lit up,
Mm,
with the VCU connection because he obviously loves the city of Richmond and
sure.
talking immediately jumped into the food scene. But talking about Notre Dame, you guys kind of have a unique program, and there's a couple of ACC teams who have similar restraints, even though you're a Power Four school. You've got some things working against you in terms of academics are very strong. You're a northern school. You guys, there's a lot going on there. Can you talk a little bit about your recruiting strategy and how you guys try to do that? Because I know when Coach Stifler, when I talked to him, it was all about building a program. Whereas some schools can build one team, they can build a
Sure.
team per year. Whereas the Irish had a little bit more transfers this year than you have in years past. But for the most part, you have to really rely on getting high school kids, developing them, and then retaining them.
Yeah. No, I think that's still always going to be our just kind of what we think our niche is to being successful and where some of our most talented players will come from. I think it can be a challenge, but I think the way we try to view it, right? Like we'll always be biased and optimistic through our own lens, but because of what Notre Dame is, what it stands for, and what it's always been, you get kids who actually want to come to Notre Dame and then they want to stay at Notre Dame. So like our retention rate is just way higher than most places. And so now all of a sudden where, and Notre Dame holistically talks about this, but like we want to be more transformational than transactional. And so, you don't have to deal with as many guys, just chasing money and doing it for those reasons, right? Like you have some guys who come here and they come here for, very small opportunities and they make the most of it and end up being really good players and draft picks, right? And so I think again, some guys still see Notre Dame for what it is and the opportunity that it is. And again, it's not easy. It's hard. We talk about it with our guys all the time and we make sure that's something that they choose because again, there are days in February where, hey, we're inter squadding. You had a tough math test. It's gray skies out right now. It's chilly, and now you got to go face Jack Riddell on the mound, and you got to find a way to have a good at bat. Like those are not easy things to do.
Absolutely. When you're identifying some of these recruits, are you looking for that kind of like, I mean, because everyone's committing to the school and they can commit, but are you looking for kind of a deeper commitment, knowing that they're not going to have a huge freshman year and then try to go somewhere else?
No, I think you definitely have to find that, right? Like I think, any assistant you talk to, I mean, they'll talk to you about their connections that they build with high school coaches and summer coaches. And I think those are all real things because you have to figure out, what type of kid you're getting. And so, I mean, it's funny nowadays too. I mean, coaches, we talk about like, all right, how many times does a kid change summer teams, right? Like Is that a pattern that he's already had from a young age? So it'll be easy for him to continue. Or are you seeing a guy who's played with the same summer organization since he was 11 years old, right? Like, so again, you start to get a little bit of insight into the guy and the family's minds of, what they want and kind of where their focus becomes. And so then all of a sudden that starts to match up with us. And again, we kind of have our sweet spots of where we really try to recruit from and where our Notre Dame brand is really strong and does a good job. And, we have a lot of guys who are very attached to that brand.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to mention, that you have a national brand, but obviously you're in the Midwest, and it seems like you've gone and gotten a lot of Midwest kids. Is that something you try to get? Because those are guys that are also used to the weather. They're not going to be wishing they were somewhere else necessarily in terms of the weather. Is that something you guys are also kind of looking into? Obviously Bino and Parker come to mind, Michigan kids who are somewhat nearby. And I think Riddell was a Dakota kid, and you went and got some of the transfers you got were from Minnesota. Is that something you guys are kind of looking? I mean, that way, it's hard to go get a Southern kid and convince him to come up to South Bend, I feel like.
Yeah, I think for us, like we've got kind of our couple hubs, and like we definitely think we have to start in the Midwest. And again, I think most coaches would tell you like if you want to win in recruiting, you got to win in your backyard first, and then go out from there. And so I think for us, we have a very concentrated effort of, how do we win in between Kansas City and Pittsburgh? How do we get into New Jersey? As we get a little further out there, and then probably SoCal are kind of our three biggest, hot spots. And you start looking at some of our recruiting classes coming in the next couple of years, and kind of where we've been. Like that's kind of what it looks like. And then again, we because of our alumni base, sure we can go into other spots as well and tie into some legacy pieces when we need to. But that's kind of where we start, and then we start outsourcing from there.
Absolutely. And now you obviously had really good success last year with your recruiting. This year, you've got a little bit more hype even than last year, who obviously successful on the field, but D1 ranked two of your guys that are coming in as top 100 recruits. They were both in the top 15, in fact.
Yep.
Caden Crowell and Brandon Logan. How excited are you about this recruiting class? We'll get into some more deeper stuff, but you got to be really excited about the job you guys have done bringing in another class on top of what you guys did last year.
No, 100%. I think the most exciting thing about this group is now they'll go earn jobs, right? I felt like Bino and Park last year, we needed them to play, right? Some of these guys, they're really talented and they will go out there and earn opportunities and they'll earn playing time, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be forced upon them. And I think that's where you want to be at as a program is like, yep, our talented freshmen, they earn those opportunities, they earn that playing time, and then all of a sudden they kind of build some confidence off that because then all of a sudden they don't feel like they're fighting for their lives the second that they're competing in the ACC play. That they've already been fighting for that opportunity throughout the fall, and so Caden's a guy that he's going to get the ball plenty this year. I mean, that was one of the main things we felt like we needed to address was we needed more talented left-handed pitching. We felt like we were deficient in that the past couple of years. And to be honest with you, we felt that on the offensive side of things too, because we wouldn't start facing good left-hand pitchers till we got in the ACC, and so then all of a sudden we would struggle with them. And so now, you look at some of the freshmen, and Caden Crowell has been really good. Dylan Singleton's been really good. The addition of Noah Rooney has been really good. So again, we've been able to face a couple, talented lefties, and I think that's been really productive for us on the offensive side of things as well. But those three guys they'll get the ball plenty for sure. And Belo's an interesting one because he's a football player. So we haven't been able to see him a whole heck of a lot. He does a great job of coming over and hitting probably 4 times a week with us, just kind of when he can around his football schedule. He still can go track the ball out in center field as good as anybody I've seen. He's not losing that skill set anytime soon.
Absolutely. And, you brought up a good point with last year. One of the things I loved is again, and is the commitment to building a program, right? It seemed like Coach Stifler was committed to playing those young guys, even as let them struggle a little bit. I think that was huge. I mean, they both ended up hitting over 300, Bino and Parker. Jace and Noah Coit got opportunities. O'Sheen Lee came up big towards the end of the year. I know his overall numbers don't look great, but he was really solid down the stretch. Ultimately, you had a team that was competing for an NCAA tournament spot.
Right.
That must have been, I mean, you guys are playing for the future, but all of a sudden you guys found yourself in the present having a team that could, compete for an NCAA tournament spot. What kind of told you during the season that you guys could compete in the present last year, as opposed to, you kind of thought you're probably playing for next year, but then all of a sudden you guys start winning ball games and putting together series wins.
I think the biggest thing, we talked about is like when we were scuffling a little bit at the beginning of the year, it was some of those guys that needed to learn how to win in the ACC, and our elite players had to start playing like elite players. You know, Jack Riddell started pitching like one of the best guys in the country every Friday night. That made our coaching decisions a whole heck of a lot easier. Bina Waters at 420 over his last 20 games last year. And so again, you start getting some of those things. Davis Johnson really took off down the back stretch. And so you had some guys playing really, really well. And then all of a sudden, coaches, you kind of just get to stay out of the way, let the good players go play. And it makes everything easier. And I think the best thing that happened for the team this year was the guys learned how to win last year. And so now there's not as much wishing or hoping. It's, hey, there's an expectation. We're going to be good this year. We're going to go win some ball games, and we're going to run out a really good club.
I love that. So it's really still really young, and the team's still really young. But like we just said, all those guys that got experience last year, they're not as young as you might think. Yeah, they're
Right.
sophomores, but they got a ton of experience. It's deeper than I think it's been since you guys have been there. It feels like you finally got your guys in there. But then you bring in 7 transfers. You and I talked last year that I think among all the sports, you only had a handful of transfers among all the powerful sports. You guys get 7 guys in and really boost that youth with some older guys, Quitrani from Cornell, Drew Berkland. You already mentioned Noah Rooney from Minnesota. Andrew Graham, who's an underrated guy from SU Denver. You get a proven ACC pitcher in Ty Uber. It's got to be really exciting that you were able to get some of those guys in, because I know the academic standards are tough. Obviously, a
Yeah.
Stanford to Notre Dame transfer is not too difficult to get in, I would imagine. But some of the others, getting
Right.
those in there.
No, it's we Notre Dame is definitely more flexible around guys who are grad
That's
transfers.
true. Yeah.
And again, Mark Quatrani is the first undergrad transfer we brought in, but coming in from the Ivy League, as you can imagine, Notre Dame was willing to bring in some credits. And you look at a guy like Drew Berkland, he actually graduated from Minnesota in 3 years. Smart kid, finance degree. I mean, he was arguably one of the best players we had this fall. I mean, it was a really, really impressive fall, and I think he did a great job of elevating some other guys' play. It was kind of fun to watch. Burke and Jace Lee and Mark Quatrani and Davis Johnson and Parker Prestevich. All trying to see who can be the best hitter this fall. I mean, you had some real competition, and that was with Bino was dinged up this fall, and so that's kind of without your All American even competing against them. So I think you'll see some real length in the lineup this year. But I think, Drew Berkland, brought some personality, brought some mentality to him. That's really helps kind of elevate this club. And again, he's a heck of a ball player too. But again, now you got Jace Lee, who went out and had an awesome summer in the Northwoods, got another 250 at bats. He's just playing like such an experienced player, and his high end talent is really showing up. And so I think he's one where if I think it's kind of an easy, like, hey, if you're looking for a breakout player, Jace Lee's probably the easiest name to be able to pencil down for the Irish this year for sure.
Absolutely. Jace is definitely a guy I think I've even mentioned on Twitter as a prime breakout candidate. I don't know if he's gonna make my article, because I think I have a limit on games that he may have gone over, but he's definitely a breakout candidate for me. Noah Coy's another who was somebody you guys really liked out of the gate and just didn't quite start out of the gate as well as he'd like. But somebody I also wanted to mention, I noticed he hit a lot during the summer, and then he was hitting during the fall, and he was only a pitcher last year. Chase Vanamade, is he a two-way guy now, or is
He
is
he came in as a two way. The funny thing was, so Chase, Parker, and Bino's senior year of high school, there were 5 guys who were up for the Michigan State Player of the Year. They were 3 of the 5. The fun fact that I joke with Bino about all the time and rub him the wrong way is I was like, Bino, you were a slap guy. Like Van Mead hit all the home runs, not Bino. But last year, and again, Chase is going to play a big role for us on the mound again as well this year. But I think he needed more at bats versus college pitching just to kind of keep getting in a rhythm. I think he came a long way offensively this fall, but I mean I mean, it's 6'5", it's strength, it's levers, and it's real bat speed. And so, I mean, he was able to really impact the ball. I think last year his chase was a little too much, and he would get himself out. He brought that number down. It's still a little bit high, but I think it's more the right chase. And again, the batted ball data is really really good. And so now it's just going to be, how do we mix him in between coming in the mound, getting some at bats, especially just kind of competing for at bats with the way the lineup's going to look this year in general. So, but again, at the very minimum, he's going to compete for some at bats and give us a power bat that, maybe it's coming off the bench, maybe it's DH and some, just doing some of those different roles for sure.
Yeah, it was funny because when I was doing my summer stuff, I found that he was hitting, and then I was seeing in the fall the analytics was, I mean, he was exit velocity numbers. He was there a lot on that. So I was like, okay, they're not just putting him out there because they need an extra position player for
No,
scrimmages, do they? So
Chase is the real hitter for sure.
love that, love that. It's interesting, yeah, because again, the depth is unprecedented in your 4 years. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how you guys get creative with some of that depth you guys have. You mentioned the breakout candidate Davis Johnson last year, kind of out of nowhere. It felt like last year kind of came in and had a breakout year, both behind the plate and DHing. Obviously, he was splitting some time with Carson Tinney. Is it going to be kind of similar? Because Quatrani's a great hitter. We saw him over the summer. It looks like your catching group again, very very strong.
Yeah, I think we're gonna use Davis's athleticism to our advantage. Davis is gonna play left, he's gonna catch, he's gonna DH. So, I mean, Davis has some of the best bat speed on the team, and he's got, a really good eye, really good feel for the zone. So, like, his bat is gonna keep him in the lineup, and he's just one of those guys who's, he's a sneaky 6'7" runner, and so, I mean, it's a good athlete, and so we're just gonna use him in different spots to keep his bat in the lineup. He's gonna spell Quatrani sometimes and let Quatrani go DH. And then there are going to be days where, maybe Bino's out and left and Davis is DH and whatever, all those things will get figured out as we get more into the year. But, Davis is going to, he's going to see his name at the top of the lineup somewhere in there pretty consistently for sure.
Yeah, that's perfect segue. I was going to ask Bino Waters, where is he playing? He obviously he's got some ability, some athleticism, figuring out who's playing where. And then Parker Brustowich played first base last year. I know he could play third potentially. You guys are still trying to figure out. You got some versatility, but also trying to figure out who's going to go where because you had DeMarco penciled in every day defensively last year, and he's obviously graduated.
Yeah, Park will be going back and forth between first and third. Jamie Z will be the big one for name for you to learn as a freshman. I mean, he is a high end defender and he led our team in home runs this fall actually as a freshman. So, he's a guy that's gonna see his name in the lineup very consistently because it's really impressive defensive tool. So Jamie will flip back and forth between second and third. So when Parker's at third, you'll probably see Jamie at second. When Park's at first, then you'll probably see Jamie go to third some, and then Coy will be at short. But yeah, there's still plenty of competition going on, and I think the good thing is we had some guys who played really well, and so now it's like, all right, do we have some lineups that we can run out in different matchups? Okay, we're facing a left-hand pitcher, let's get a few more right-handed bats in there. Okay, we're facing where maybe Chase Vandermeed's playing first or something like that. Okay, hey, we're facing a right-hand pitcher, maybe Bino's at first, maybe Dylan Passo's at first, a couple different things like that, how we configure the DH, the outfield spots. So we do have several pieces that we can move around. And then there's still going to be several guys who are going to be pretty consistently locked into the lineup. It'll just see what position they're playing.
Absolutely. And, talking about Parker Brustowich, he's a big guy. He hits, but didn't have a ton of power last year. I understand he's been working on that. How's that been going? He's 6'4". He's one of those guys that I look at and I'm like, it's somebody who hasn't figured out he's a big guy yet.
Yeah, no, he's a little bit of a baby giraffe. I think the good thing is he's up about 12 to 15 pounds from last year. He went from hitting no home run last fall and last spring to he had a couple out this fall. So I think the power numbers are improving based on his strength, and then I think there have just been a couple things we've tweaked in terms of his approach to try to take advantage of some counts and do some things. And we played a fall game versus Xavier, and he had a long home run there, pull side, and that was kind of encouraging to see. And he mixed in another one later on in the fall, and that's still paired up with his high end two strike approach, and he's just a hard guy to put away, and he's a hard guy to get out. I can't remember who he was facing, but he ended up having like a 16 or 17 pitch at bat this fall. That was just kind of comical because it just wouldn't end. But I mean, it's just, he can really hit. He's got a real feel for the barrel, and he is just way smarter than most kids who play college baseball. So he's a fun guy to coach in that situation for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he was great last year, regardless of what the power numbers look like. Hitting that well as a freshman is not easy to do. Speaking of freshmen, we've talked about how talented this recruiting class is. Is Caden Crowell going to play two ways? He's listed as a two-way player.
Hey, Caden's probably going to lock more in on the pitching side of
Mhm.
things this year. I mean, Caden's got a real shot to lock down one of the weekend jobs this year, and so I think that's where predominantly most of his focus has been this fall. We tinkered around with a little bit of the two way kind of throughout the fall, but most of his focus has been on the pitching side of things.
Yeah, it's really hard. I feel like to do two ways this day and age, especially when you can lock in somewhere and get because you get hurt, you lose you lose two spots basically. Mason Barth is another name that comes to mind. Is there any under the radar? I mean, Jamie Z sounds like an under the radar freshman that's going to make an impact. Is there anybody else that comes to mind?
So, I think Jamie Z should probably, he's still got to go win it in the preseason. But if we were playing tomorrow, Jamie would be starting for us. When we played our two fall games, Jamie was starting. On the pitching side of things, we mentioned Kroll, you mentioned Brandon Logan, Will Geisel, and Dylan Singleton on the mound are two real pieces to know. Dylan Singleton was arguably our most consistent pitcher throughout the fall. I mean, it's four real pitches for strikes from the left side. And I mean, it's just strikes, and he was just really, really hard to score on. Uh, Will Geisel is, I mean, he was a quarterback in high school, and he looks like a quarterback on the mound. I mean, he's a big, thick dude. And I mean, it's, 92, 94 with a plus slider and a good changeup as well. I mean, so there's some real strikeout stuff, and you can see Will coming in out of the back end of the bullpen for us, this year as a freshman as well. So I think those are a couple guys to definitely pay attention to.
Love that because you got me right away last year when we talked about you got me right away on the freshman you got now. You bring back some sophomores of experience. We talked about Vanamade. You got Keller Klosterman back, Brady Coaster. I'm trying to remember who else. The O'Sheen Lee, obviously, we've talked
Mhm.
about. Those guys are going to come back. You've brought in this talented freshman class. You get Radek Burkholz back, who
Yep.
missed basically all of last year. That's a crucial, bullpen piece. DJ Hellwig didn't have the season he hoped to have. He was a guy I expect to have a big breakout. He comes back. Obviously, you lose Rory Fox and Jackson Denny's out of the rotation, but other than that, you got to feel really good about this bullpen and this pitching staff.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with the guy on Friday night. I mean, for as good as he was at the end of the year, Jack's continued to develop and continue to work. Jack's up probably 20 pounds right now. I mean, he's a big, thick dude. I mean, he's throwing really, really hard. So I wouldn't be shocked if he mixed in a couple 100-mile-an-hour fastballs this spring. So, it's everybody throws harder in the fall when you're throwing 2 inning stints. His couple of 2 inning stints, I mean, it was very rarely did he throw a fastball, 95. It was a lot of sixes to eights. And so, I mean, it was really firm, and it was really good. So, I mean, he kind of sets the weekend for us and sets the mentality for the pitching staff. But, you're going to see Caden Kroll probably competing for weekend spots. Ty Uber, he did some of that for Stanford, obviously, last year. You'll see Kellen Klosterman competing for some of those spots. So, and there are a couple other guys who'll mix in for it as well. So I think for as good as the pitching staff ended up being last year, I think we had more question marks going into the spring last year than we do this year. I definitely think there's more stuff. I think Coach Volts would tell you there weren't quite as many strikes this fall as he wanted there to be. But if there's one thing I know Coach Volts will get squared away, it's we're going to throw strikes. We were arguably the best strike throwing team in the ACC last year, so I know we'll be where we need to be come spring. So in the fall, you've got to use it a little bit as your time to tinker and work on some stuff. So with that comes a little bit of mistakes. But I think the pitching staff's going to be really, really good for us again this year.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Jack again. I got to interview him a couple months ago. He's been one of the most underrated guys in the conference. I mean, he had a great freshman year, and then last year we saw what he did. He was almost overshadowed a little bit by what Rory Fox did on Saturdays. But I mean, you're right. He's one of the, he might be, if I'm power ranking some of the Friday night guys, he's going to be in that top 5 in the conference for sure. And I don't think a lot of people remember that. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just people seem to just forget about Notre Dame a little bit since you guys have been in that rebuilding mode. But, I think that kind of helps you guys flying under the radar a little bit to, be able to surprise some people. One of the things I love is that you guys are going to test yourselves early in the Jacksonville College Classic in the second weekend of the season in Jacksonville, Florida. I'll be there for that. I cannot wait. You guys are going to face LSU, Indiana, UCF. How excited are you guys for that opportunity to kind of get tested really early? It matters, but it's a nice test. But then at the same time, if you guys go 0-3, it's not the end of the world either. We saw what NC State was able to do after they had a rough weekend there.
Yeah, no, I think again, kind of mentioned earlier, like there's a different vibe around this team now. Like there's not the youthful kind of energy now. It's like there's some young players, but they're mature and experienced players. So I think there's a lot more like we expect to go out and win. And so I think even if we drop a game, I think we'll still find a way to go win the next two. And so there's no you know everybody understands it's baseball. Last year one of the best games we played was against Clemson on Friday night. We were talking about Riddell and Knack, and I mean it was 2-1 ball game, and everybody would tell you like that was a great baseball game. Both teams deserve to win, right? So like you're gonna have some of those, and I think everybody can look up and be like, okay, yeah, we played a baseball game and lost. That happens. But I think nowadays, like we're gonna have a little bit more lineup depth, and so in some form or fashion, we'll find a way to win right now. And so I think whether it's going 3-0, 2-1, whatever it be, we've got expectations that we'll have a lot of really good weekends this year. And so just getting a chance to have an ACC caliber weekend in week 2, I think is just good for us to jump into it, and should continue to help our RPI and in terms of the postseason side of things later on in the year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know you guys normally play, a lot of road games, and you play in these smaller tournaments, but these are some bigger names. I mean, getting a chance to face the defending national champion and kind of get that test. I mean, that's got to get you amped up a little bit more than a Stetson tournament. As good as Stetson
Sure.
has been. LSU is a different name. Indiana has been really good. Apparently I'm going to see Indiana 6 times in the first 2 weekends because they're at North Carolina to start the year, and I'll be at that. But um,
Give me the scouting report week
there you
1.
go. But that's going to be a lot of fun, I think, to get that test in there. And I was really excited to hear you guys were going to be there because I only got to see you guys once in person last year. It was the ACC tournament.
I would be shocked if Stiff had a different message than what he had when we were at the Stetson tournament last year. Because I was, Stiff kind of challenged the boys last year of like, hey, this is kind of what a regional field looks like. We're facing Iowa on Friday night, and you're facing Obermueller, and he was a top 50 pick, I think, if I remember right. So it's like, all right, here you go. Here's what a Friday looks like. I can't remember. I think Stetson was in the regionals last year. If they weren't,
Yeah,
they were really
I
close. And,
think so.
they had a good year, and it was a good atmosphere. I thought that was a good start for us. And like I said, based on just the natural steps of our program, like that was what that team needed last year. This team is ready for this step this year. And so I think you'll see a lot of good baseball from the Irish for sure.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. That's a really good way to simulate a regional. I know when I covered it 2 years ago with Virginia, O'Connor talked a lot about how they treated it as a regional, and that's how they handled the pitching and everything, and basically simulated it that way, even though it wasn't quite like that.
Right.
So it's a way to, because there's no other way to really simulate that during the season because you play you play either midweek or you play game series. So, well, that's going to do it for me. I mean, this has been great. I could talk ball with you for a while, but I said 30 minutes. We're at 36, so I appreciate your time. I know you've had a busy day of meetings so far, but I really appreciate it. And is there anything else you want to add before I let the audience go?
Just go Irish.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We'll be back on Thursday with another interview, but until then, go Irish.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bonnie.